Hello, this is Jeff Amelse. Welcome to my presentation to the Chicago Coin Club of July 9th, 2025, titled Civil War Tokens, with emphasis on those with cracks, cuds, and other oddities. Let's start by looking at what Civil War tokens are. Um, the Civil War began on April 12th, 1861. This led to a shortage of copper and nickel as these metals were diverted to munitions. Mintage of the Indian head cent, which had recently begun issues, had dropped to about 10 million in 1861, and that led to a shortage of small change and the private minting of Civil War tokens. Civil War tokens are mainly divided into two categories: patriotic tokens and store cards that were advertised and accepted by individual stores for their goods and services. Thousands of varieties of each type were issued. Since these were private issues, they were not subject to quality control of the U.S. Mint. So, in order to pare down from the thousands, I decided to focus this talk on examples with mint errors, including cuds, cracks, and other oddities such as spelling errors and alternate metals. A few of the varieties will be tracked by die state from early issues with no problems to late states with multiple cracks or cuds. All this came to an end when these things were banned by Congress on April 22nd, 1864. A lot has and continues to be written about Civil War tokens. There are two books by Fuld and his son. One on the Civil War store cards, the second one on patriotic issues. And on the right, I show 6 volumes of newsletters that are put out by the Civil War Token Society every month. Have I read through all of those 6 volumes? No. So I don't profess to be an expert on Civil War tokens. I'm really a newbie, but they've caught my interest because of the wide variety of die states that can be followed. So let's start with a token, picture of which was put out on the Chicago Coin Club Facebook site by Devin Kane. This coin is an absolute mess. It features Indian head on the obverse, but notice there's no liberty in the headband. And it's a combination of store card because it advertises the Broas Brothers Pie Bakery in New York, and patriotic coin because you'll see the legend "United We Stand" around the Liberty head, and on the back, "One Country." So like I said, the coin's an absolute mess. Obverse, shattered die, absolutely shattered die, multiple cracks everywhere. The legend on the right is being pulled to the rim by severe flow lining. On the reverse, we see a combination of cracks. Here's a heavy crack going into the C. There's another crack coming down from the S into the 1, but also heavy clashing. And the clash die was rotated relative to its original position. In particular, take a look at the position of this H, which should be under the star. Little difficult to see on this particular coin. We'll see it a little clearer coming up. So this is a very late die state. So we can step back and look at earlier die states of this particular token. This one is a middle die state. It has obverse cracks. It has clashing on the back. So here you can see that H below the star a little more clearly, and the H from the clash of the rotated die here. You can see the clashing marks a little more clearly, perhaps, here and up on the bottom and around. Um, so again, this is a middle die state. We back up even further. This is an early die state. So we see the cracks. We see no cracks on the back, no clashing. Again, H below the star in its correct position. Um, so this indicates that the cracks seem to have occurred before the clashing on the back. Things get even a little weirder. So the Brose Brother pie bakers used this heavily clashed reverse die and paired it with a one country similar type die on the obverse. So I'll ask myself the first question. So, Jeff, are these tokens with severe cracks and clashings and cuds very rare? No, they're not. That first one, the one with that's really a mess. I looked recently on eBay and I saw 14 examples. But these examples form a good observation of Jeff's law of economics, which is what are you willing to pay for a token? There will be someone there to take it from you. So the examples that were out there run from very inexpensive, maybe about $30, all the way up to I saw that late one offered, albeit at um, uh, high state at over $1,000. So here's a different obverse piled paired with this one country reverse. Um, this is Indian head again, United We Stand, but clearly a different die because here there's a cud at about 3 o'clock. We can um, take a look at a later die state of this that shows that cud at 3 o'clock, maybe a little more expanded, but now additional cuds running from all the way from 12 o'clock down to about 4 o'clock. Um, and again, reverse, this one shows some clashing, but no cuds. I mean, no cracks. So this is a combination patriotic coin. Shows General Washington, his portrait between two flags. Has a very, very heavy cud here, smaller cud above this star with a crack running into the star. On the reverse is the motif exchange within a laurel wreath of oak leaves. We can walk this one back and look at an earlier die state, which is shown here. Um, you can see that the cut is much smaller in size. So again, exchange reverse. This token features what is called the French Liberty head, facing to the left with Pythagorean cap. Um, has a crack coming in from about 3 o'clock off the rim um, extending through the cap and running down through the face all the way down to below the chin. So I would actually call this crack cud, um, with perhaps a little more severe cud in the center of the die. Okay, so we can take a look at a later state, and this one's a little more subtle. The crack uh, or cud has now been increased in size, still runs down to below the chin. A little more obvious if I put the two side by side. So here's the earlier die state, thin crack cud. Here's the later die state with a thicker cud. This particular token we can track through multiple die states, starting with an early one. We have the French Liberty head now facing right. There's a crack coming from the rim through this star to just below the Pythagorean cap. If you look closely, you can see a little swelling below that crack. So the reverse, pretty clean, no crumbling. What I mean by crumbling will be seen on the next slide. So this is now a middle die state. That swelling has become more severe with a heavy crack underneath it. So now that swelling is anchored between two cracks. And you see start of formation of a cud right below the cap. On the reverse, this is what I mean by crumbling of the die around the letters OR. So take a good look at the size of this cud. We go to a slightly later die state. You can see that the cud is now expanded. Again, reverse remains with a lot of crumbling, perhaps a little bit more, starting to get mushy around the letters of AR and Army. And a new prominent crack is now seen going through star 2 to the hair below the bust. Late die state. So now we're getting the formation of a heavy internal cud that now extends up through the cap and ends in a crack, if you will, or extension of the cud up before the cap. And again, heavy crumbling on the reverse. That cud becomes even more pronounced. I'm calling this a middle late die state. And then finally, I call this a very late die state where the two cracks have now joined and a huge cud fills that entire region. I put this token up, shows French Liberty head facing right. On the reverse, it's a patriotic coin with a shield with U.S. Stars and stripes on the back. But the reason I put it up here is that it's got an internal cud through the shield. And I believe that's somewhat unusual. Usually cuds start to form at the rim and move into the field. Here's another example of a Liberty head facing right, but a different die. Um, and a crack cud coming up from the rim at roughly 7 o'clock, running all the way up through the face and exiting the cap as a little bit of a crack. Okay, and this one, the reverse, our familiar Roas brother pie bakers. So those guys, again, that first coin was not rare. Uh, in fact, the late die state seems to be one of the more prevalent die states. These guys continued to have coins, tokens coined for them after all these dies underwent some massive cracking and cud formation. So they should have stuck to what they were good at, which was baking pies. This coin is a store card advertising a fruit dealer and shattered die, a very severely shattered die with lots of cracks running on the obverse and some cracks on the reverse. You can see a heavy one here. Um, Here's a token. Another patriotic token shows George Washington on the obverse, a shield with what should be stars and stripes on the reverse. Um, this is a late die state, internal cut, not extending to the rim. Um, this particular uh, pairing of dies seems to always be seen with very mushy strike on both the obverse and the reverse. So sinking kind of blurs both the portrait and the shield on the reverse. And again, that occurs all the way back to an earlier die state where there is no cud. This token has what is called the Indian princess head facing left. On the reverse, I would call this a middle die state. We can see cracks and cuds starting to form, internal cuds starting to form above the N here, heavy crack under the N. I would call this a cud inside the V starting to form, which fills the V. And here's a late die state of this particular variety where the cud is now coming in um, from the edge, pretty significant cud, and the cud above the N and the filling of the N and the filling of the V becomes more severe. This token, again, has French Liberty head facing right, massive cud before the face, which actually wipes out part of the face. This coin is believed to be pretty rare, perhaps an R10. And again, Jeff's Law of Economics. I got this one pretty inexpensively. There's one that I believe is still out on eBay for over $1,000. I put this token out there. It's a store card for a uh, a brew house in New York. I put it out there because I like beer, but it also has a cud above this star here with a crack going down to the star below and a little bit of a cud there. Next slide shows a token of that from that same brew house. But this token is clean, no cud. But somebody ought to call me out on this one, because if you look closely, this is really a different obverse die. Um, this token has the signature of the minter, L. Roloff. He was a prolific minter of tokens for various merchants. And if we go back and look at the one with the cud, you'll see that there is no signature underneath it. So this these two motifs, the profile with the long beard on the obverse and the beer stein on the reverse, there are actually several different uh, unique obverses and reverses. Here's another coin of George Washington. So patriotic, complaining about the shortage of coinage, not 1 cent on the reverse, but advertisement for the store that had these issued. This coin or this token has massive cuds below the bust, which almost wipes out the date, and cuds running from about 11 o'clock through over 1 o'clock above the portrait, again, running into the rim. This coin is very rare. I believe it's listed as an R10. So we can move backwards in die states on this one. So again, previous coin had the cuds. If you look closely at the reverse, you can see evidence of um, clashing around here, around there. We move back to an earlier die state. We can still see the clashing on the reverse here, perhaps a little more pronounced with this darker coin. But you can see that there's a heavy crack that's coming from the rim to the tip of the bust, and that will eventually start to form that cud that covers the date. And then we can move further back. And here's an early die state. Still some evidence of reverse clashing, but very, very weak, if hardly visible, crack going from the rim to the bust. And finally, all the way back to an early die state where there is neither cuds, cracks, or clashing on the reverse. Okay, so now let's put up another one. Reason I put this one up is because we're going to start talking about other errors, including spelling errors. So I chose this particular example to put up because it has a crack above the ERA of federal and a small cud there. But it has the correct spelling of B. So the legend reads, the federal union, it must and shall be preserved. And on the reverse, Army and Navy, so very patriotic coin. Okay. So here I show a different pairing of obverse and reverse dies, two different dies from the previous token, but the same motifs. So again, federal union must and shall be preserved. But notice the spelling error of BY, buy, instead of BE on this coin, or this token, which is highlighted in red on the next slide. There are other things to look for when you're attributing these. And on the reverse of this particular token, we see some odd-shaped berries associated with the leaves on the reverse. And I believe this is the only example where I've seen these odd-shaped circular berries. So let's keep going with spelling errors. So um, this coin or this token is as this example should read. It's patriotic token. The obverse is the flag of our union with the flag waving. On the reverse, the legend reads, if anybody attempts to tear it down, meaning the union, shoot him on the spot. So here's a token with the same motifs, but a spelling error where we see spoot instead of spot. So let's talk about other oddities now. Moving into alternate metals. Here's a zinc token, late dye state with heavy reverse Cuds running from about 1 o'clock all the way down to maybe 4 o'clock or so. This is a store card advertising for a grocer. We can move back to an earlier dye state where we see only one of the Cuds instead of the three significant ones that were shown on the previous example. And then finally moving back to an early dye state where there's no reverse Cuds. I put this example up for two reasons. It is an example of another alternate metal, this time white metal, and it has an off-center reverse, significant off-center reverse. So two issues with this one. It's a rare coin, about an R8. As an example of another alternate metal, we're talking Civil War times, so I had to put up a token with the portrait of Abe Lincoln on it. And this one was minted in German silver. Now I'll show you two tokens where uh, that I believe show what I believe to be miscut planchets. Some may call these off-center strikes, but I don't think so. I think that this is a miscut planchet, and you can see the excess metal on both sides. This particular token pairs an obverse with the portrait of George Washington on the front, and the back has is advertising for Wilson's medal. Always see a weak strike on this motif, which is paired with a number of different obverses. Here's another example of a miscut planchet, this time with a beer glass. So again, another brew hall. Put this one up for two reasons. Like I said, I like beer. And again, you can see evidence of the miscut planchet on both sides. Now let's take a look at some off-center um, tokens. So this is United We Stand, our friends, Broas Brothers of New York. Boy, those guys really should have stuck to making pies instead of having tokens issued. Um, but pretty significantly off center as shown on both sides of the token. This next one has the French Liberty facing right. Uh, Probably the most off center token that I have seen. Although I must admit, I haven't been looking as long as some of you, I'm sure. But unfortunately, some helpful Henry decided to poke a hole in this and probably wore it as a necklace. Put this one up for two reasons. One, again, um, as it's struck off center. And this, um, again, we're in the Civil War, and this one is protesting slavery. So it has what I call mature uh, liberty facing to the left. Notice the date. This date has a period behind it, and it's surrounded by arrows, which were used for a short time in the 1850s on silver issues, dimes, quarters, half dollars, that were there to show that there was a change in weight, a reduction in weight of those particular denominations during that period of time. So here's another store card, this time advertising a butcher in New York. Has a picture of a bull on the obverse, late die state with heavy cracks down on the bottom here, all the way around, and a cud above the store's name. So we can walk back on this one a little bit. This is what I'm calling a middle die state. Still shows a crack, but no cuds. Um, this one was struck in brass. Now, brass is a metal that is significantly harder than copper. So one can question whether the cracking started to form due to the issuance of tokens in brass, which led to the cracking of the dies. And then we can back up even further on this one. So here's a brass example that's clean. So, so again, it appears to me that we started out striking with these dies, brass coins, um, started to form the crack above the merchant's name, and then moved into that copper example that I showed you that has more cracks and cuds. And that copper example is actually rarer than these brass examples. So perhaps these guys decided to retire the dates when they started, after they started striking the copper examples. Here's another store card. Shows a picture of a child on the front with a face that only a mother could love. I put it up here because it's got a significant cud above the U in bully for you on the obverse. So this again is a store card issued by the Lamphere manufacturer of metallic cards, issued in The store was in Cincinnati, Ohio. Here's an earlier obverse. Cud not as pronounced. Reverse, different reverse. Okay. Same manufacturer. Lamphere manufacturer metallic cards. But you'll notice that this says Cincinnati, Ohio, down below the wreath. Whereas in the previous example, we've got Cincinnati, Ohio, underneath manufacturer of metallic cards. Here's an example that shows an obverse with a portrait of General McClellan, a prominent Union general during the war. Three significant cuds that run from about 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock on the obverse. Yet another Indian head with a prominent cud before the portrait on the obverse. So enough of these cuds already. Let's now take a look at some Confederate restrikes. So there were coins issued by the Confederacy. There were cents. And they used dies to strike a cent with this obverse portrait, this reverse of 1 cent. The ones that were minted during the war are extremely rare. When they come up on auction, they go for tens of thousands of dollars. This guy Brashlow managed to purchase the dies and use them to restrike coins in 1961 to commemorate 200 years from the start of the Civil War. The dies at this point had been severely defaced. You can see multiple strikes through 1 cent on the reverse and issues on the obverse. So he used these dies to strike a lot of tokens. 10,000 were issued in copper. There were some issued in gold, and about 2,500 were issued in silver, again from the same dies, defaced dies that Brashlow had obtained. Now we get to what are not likely official issues. Call these Confederate commemorative coins. This one has the French Liberty head facing to the left. Says Confederate States of America. 1 cent on the back. But again, these are likely not official issues, probably recently struck, perhaps even in China. So this one is struck in copper. Here's copper, a Confederate commemorative coin of a dime, 1/10 instead of 1 cent, struck in silver. This is another commemorative, different reverse. As you can see, it says 1/100, so basically a penny, struck in copper. And that's all that I've got. So thank you for your attention. If you have questions or comments, please send an email to me at this email address, and I will entertain requests for copies of these slides and you can also obtain a copy of this recorded presentation.